All right, everybody, happy Thursday. Welcome into our late week edition of Concrete Jungle, a New York baseball podcast here on FingerLakes1.com to come to you guys live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. I am Paul Russo. Across from me, as always, Kyle Evans. Kyle, happy Thursday. We made it to the late week here officially.
Yeah, and I think it's been a weird week. Gary Sanchez is a Met. I don't think I ever saw that coming. Sorry to break the news right away, even though a lot of you guys probably know, but that's weird to me.
Yeah, we will get to that momentarily. He's with Syracuse, and we'll touch on that. Because the Mets are in that portion of their injured list is interesting at the moment, so we'll touch on that, obviously. You know, off air, to peel back the onion a little bit here before we get going, we are actually in a bit of a disagreement, I think, between how to really weigh this week for the team. So this is probably going to be an interesting one. I thought we'd be a collectively more positive voice here compared to really the past, 5 podcasts dating back to a couple of weeks ago. And I don't think that's going to be the case.
Not quite. Maybe next week, but we'll get to it. But I don't agree right now.
Yeah, let's we'll get into that, but before we get jumping into that, take care of some housekeeping items here, like thanking DeSano Propane. They are 4 generations strong because they're a trustworthy family-owned business with unmatched customer service. You can go online at DeSanoPropane.com for more information, or you can call them toll-free at 1-800-752-4574 today. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane and Cafe 19. Serving breakfast, lunch, pastries, celebratory cakes, pies, and catering. Guaranteed fresh and always local at Cafe 19 in Seneca Falls. Also offering an assortment of beverages including teas, coffee, and espresso drinks. You can check out their full menu and weekly specials at their website, xixcafe.com. And we'll jump right into it here in a way. Let's begin with the Yankees. Sweeping Oakland, kind of mentioned, right? I mean, this is one of those series that, on paper, if you don't at least sweep, you need to be handling your business, and the Yankees certainly handled business, although, albeit out of the gate, it was a little bit slow off the bat on Monday, which was really interesting because I remember kind of looking at him like, crap, here we go, type deal, and end up not being a doomsday type situation for a change in a way. The Yankees went out and handled their business, and Monday, in a way, kind of becomes the afterthought game for the Yankees, kind of given how everything else kind of went. But I know for me anyway, the way it got out of the gate Monday, I was like, crap. It just seemed very slow and awkward, kind of at least out of the gate. And then, really be fair, at least to me, the offense just kind of exploded at that point, collectively overall, and really carried the Yankees throughout the entire series.
Yeah, listen, they took care of business. They beat what I think is going to end up at probably the worst team in Major League Baseball history. Everything the A's do is
it's up there.
Everything they do. I mean, defensively, pitching, we saw them make several errors. There's not a lot of positives. Their offense they don't really have those guys in the lineup that can do damage. So yeah, obviously it's a good series win. You did what you were supposed to do, and you can only control what your schedule is. But in my opinion, let's not jump the gun too quick, because the toughest part is ahead, with 8 games against 2 AL East teams that are ahead of you. So that's why I said maybe next Thursday when we come on, I can possibly be a little more positive. But
right.
That series didn't change my mind. They're terrible.
Well, I think there's still aspects of it here, and I think this is where we can really jump into a couple of different things. Like, obviously, Tuesday, Aaron Judge comes off the injured list, and albeit he puts up an 0 slot in the lineup, he had quality at-bats on Tuesday and really just kind of exploded yesterday on Wednesday. And I think that's key because we'll jump into it here, too, in a way, because it ties in with, admittedly, the guy at the top of the order, the rookie Anthony Volpe. Yesterday, 1 for 5, but has his first career grand slam. But, that being said, pitchers are now going to be forced to pitch to him. or really, to be fair, anybody who's going to be ahead of Judge, right? Because you don't want to. It's the old adage, right? You don't want to put the guy on for free with the guy who's behind. And look, this ties into, oddly enough, to a topic we'll be discussing with the Mets as well here in just a little bit. But this lab construction is going to be really interesting. We've talked here about once Judge got back, and we knew it was going to be a short stint on the IL for him. Collectively, just based on every indication that we kind of had. Again, we've talked about the past few podcasts. It's going to be interesting to see here once Josh Donaldson gets back going here what really happens. His rehab assignment should be coming up here within the next 4 or 5 days once this homestand wraps up. So it'll be interesting to kind of see, and I think it's going to be a good problem for the Yankees to have because, look, Bader has stayed hot throughout this series. DJ LeMahieu had a little bit of a speed bump, I'd say, over the weekend of sorts, but got back at least having the quality at bats that we know DJ has against Oakland. Glaber really came on strong here over the course of the past couple of days as well. So it's going to be interesting, right, to kind of see how everything plays out. And again, kind of forget about maybe the most consistent guy throughout really the past couple of weeks, and say Anthony Rizzo, who has just been having good at bats. So I think Judge back in kind of really unlocks a different thing here for the Yankees, just based on they have to. You can't avoid not facing him anymore, right? A guy like Volpe, who's a rookie, might be chasing a little bit more, but now you can't really force the guy in the spot because he might just be sitting and waiting on a pitch. Once he figures it out in a way.
Yeah, obviously, you touched on all the good points, but we'll see if they can continue against much better teams. If they, like I said, if they split with the Rays this weekend, I'll call it a good week because you swept the A's. But then if you think about it, they split with the Rays, they're back to 10 games out of first.
Right.
So that's how far they've buried themselves already. That's why I continue
Well,
to
no,
talk about it.
if they split with the Rays, they still stay at 8 back.
True, I forgot the Rays lost last night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I got you.
But still, 8 games back. We're almost to June.
It's fair. But, and this is interesting because I'm sure you saw it, but if you were to stack the AL East and the AL Central, the Yankees would be in first place in the AL Central.
And you know what that tells me?
I know. I'm just saying, though, and this is part of it for the Yankees, like with me, that I go back to, is I don't expect Boston to continue the streak that they're on.
I'm just going to say the division race is over in my mind. Focus on the wild card.
Really?
Yeah, it's over. The Rays are just, they jumped out too far ahead. It's literally the opposite of last year, what the Yankees did to all these other teams. And the Blue Jays tried like hell to catch them in September, but even with the Yankees slumping, they couldn't because of this great start.
We thought the Mets were too far out ahead last year, and they got caught. I'm just saying, I don't maybe necessarily disagree with you in principle. I get what you mean, and I do agree with the difficulty of catching a team that has built a lead like that. But it's baseball. It's definitely possible.
Slim now. But we'll see. But these next 8 games, if they go 5-3, I think that's a good stretch. The Blue Jays, they've been slumping though, so I feel like they're going to get back on track. It's at the Rogers Center. The Rays, I think, did they just lose a series to the Orioles, or was that a split? I can't remember. But I don't think they've been playing as well as they once were. So if they go 5-3, I'll call it a good 8-game stretch, because these are 2 teams in front of you that are good teams. But if it was only like if they were only like 5 back, then I would be probably more positive. But 8, it just seems like, I don't know.
No,
it seems like a little bit.
I get it, and that's the thing. I do agree with you, maybe in the principle of it. It's just we're still here. We're getting to mid-May. It's tough for me. I think the competitor aspect of it, where it's just like I don't know if we can just write off yet. Given just looking at the way things are playing out across the landscape collectively.
It's so odd to see a lot of teams that just aren't playing good baseball. It's ugly baseball. A lot of teams are barely over 500. It's like is the league just so, like, even now
Right.
that it's like they're beating up on each other? Like, what's going on? It's kind of odd to see.
Yeah. One of the last, like, I think main talking points here I do want to talk about with the Yankees. We saw here over the course of the past few days, they kind of have what I call pitching roulettes kind of occurring here. And this dives into obviously how we talk about like roster moves and then the IL a little bit too and stuff like that. But so we saw them option Ramirez on Monday or Sunday rather, post game Sunday, to bring up Greg Weiser, who then gets sent back down for Devi Garcia to get brought up. And it's pretty interesting to me because we look at the guys kind of like say across really the Yankees here. What I find interesting is they used Garcia out of the bullpen. And I kind of wonder with him being brought up, and I know, like I said, they used him out of the bullpen yesterday, so that leaves me with more questions maybe than answers. But Johnny Brito had another. It was a rough outing for him collectively yesterday. He got out of there obviously statistically unscathed in the grand scheme of it, but just kind of watching him following along yesterday, you're kind of watching him like, yeesh, like I don't know. It kind of makes me wonder, and I'm intrigued by your thoughts on this because we've talked about Devi Garcia a lot. Not so much recently, but really I'd say at the start of last year where it kind of caught us off guard that he like started the year in Double-A last year after getting run with the Yankees in 2021. You know, could he be in line here coming up potentially? Now, Brito's spot in the rotation obviously does not come up until Monday when the Yankees are playing Toronto. But do we think that him getting called up is potentially a spot where we might see him just take Burrito's spot once through the rotation? Because I kind of feel like that's the case.
Well, since he's already optioned, doesn't he have to wait? How many days is it?
Who?
Davey Garcia was optioned after the game yesterday.
Wait, he was?
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
And so how many days?
What was the point of that then?
Just a bulk reliever, 3-inning guy, go back down. And if you noticed, he has not started any games at AAA. He's been converted to a reliever full time. So in 20 innings this year, another thing is his control problems. He has 16 walks. He struggles with command. He has a 4.50 ERA. I don't know. I mean, it's possible to give him a spot start, but now unless there's an injured, unless there's an injured guy, which that's probably coming. It's the Yankees. I don't think we'll see that. And I guess there's also a reason why. Yesterday was his first MLB appearance in I think almost 2 years. It was.
I mean,
so there's a reason why they haven't brought him up because he has not been pitching well at the minor league level. So I don't think they'll go to him, but I mean it's possible. You never know. He went 3 innings yesterday, so you're telling me he can't go another 2? I think he could if they really needed him.
So I'm now just kind of wondering, like, who's the corresponding move then?
Yeah, I kind of read into that yesterday. There was a report from Connor Foley that covers Scranton. He said that the only guy that has not been used recently or that is not on the IL is Randy Vasquez. So I don't know if that would be the move. They'd have to make more roster movements to get him on the roster. Right. But yeah, there's not really anyone available to bring up. So I don't know what they're gonna do.
I'm baffled. Because I don't understand why you even just bring him up for the bulk 3 innings. Because my next question within this was there was plenty of opportunities to get Clay Holmes like some run here within this series where it was no harm, no foul situation. They just really didn't do it. It goes back to what we said last week where, right, I guess really actually 2 weeks ago now, to be honest, where we talked about, like, back in the Mariano days, like Mariano would say if he's not feeling right, he would just want to get in a spot where it's, like, garbage time, but just so he can just go out there and work, And I just feel like this probably would have been a really good spot, especially over the course of the past 2 days where he could have gotten, like, at least an inning and just kind of at least worked on himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he did throw a scoreless inning Tuesday.
Right.
So maybe they just didn't want to go back-to-back with him. just because he did pitch the 7th
Sure.
and the 6th. So,
I just see it as more like why like could have used him still yesterday, at least to some end.
yeah, I just kind of think that was their plan all along. Save the bullpen for these big series coming up and just throw a guy like Davy Garcia just to eat innings and then send him right back down. And that's exactly what they did.
I just hate, and this is something that I don't think I've really said, at least on this podcast, but I know I've said it to like you, and I've said to a ton of our people. I just hate the way these teams kind of work the options, because now the Yankees have burned an option on Garcia. To me, it's just I.
I feel
I'm
like
not saying like we need to play the long game here, and was it really worth it? I'm just like in the grand scheme of it, if you're just going to use them like that, I would assume just use somebody that you already have up and not have to worry about it then. I don't know.
yeah, I feel like they're not high on Davy Garcia anymore, and I'm wondering like how much longer he is with this organization.
No.
Just like for example, if they were high on him, they wouldn't have done what they did yesterday. Throw him in garbage time basically, and then just set him down. So I'm just kind of wondering like how long he's going to be around for, because that was just I didn't expect that. I guess I should
No,
say.
I'm with you. Yeah.
And so Randy Vasquez is on the 40 men, so what they could probably make that move then, because I think he's a scheduled starter tonight for Scranton, but they could just scratch him and maybe that's the move then.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Severino, he threw yesterday for Scranton. We know that, albeit still a little bit maybe further down the line, we know Luis Heel is closer to coming back than maybe we initially thought. So I don't know. Who knows, right? I mean, that's why I guess that we are sitting here and not at 161 East River. I don't know. Let's talk here quickly about Oswald Peraza. We kind of alluded to it a little bit on Monday, right? We were kind of wondering about who was this corresponding move going to be for Judge when he was activated Tuesday. It ended up being Oswald Peraza, retroactive to, they classified it as, I think, the 6th, even though the injury happened on the 5th. So kind of like one of those interesting, makes you kind of raise the eyebrow a little bit. But obviously, they don't. It's weird. They don't expect him to miss too much time beyond what will just be kind of the IL stint. So this kind of buys time, and I think, excuse me, we might see potentially here another situation where, it's going to be really funny here because we've done nothing but really bash on the guy all year, obviously, but. You want to talk about a guy who was admittedly finding a groove, and Aaron Hicks ends up pulling up lame and day-to-day with left hip tightness when he was scoring on the Anthony Rizzo single on Tuesday. Could he be that guy then once Peraza is eligible to come off here in, 4 days to head to the IL? It's pretty interesting kind of see how the Yankees are, I'd say, operating on this point at the moment, but as we kind of expected, Peraza to the IL ended up being that corresponding move.
Yeah, and I think Peraza is definitely going to be option when Donaldson gets back.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough spots to play him, and obviously they want him to get everyday at bats. But for him, he's probably going to be super frustrated. But that's just the way it's going to work, and I think, like we kind of talked about, it will be nice to have Donaldson back, that veteran guy. He's better than some of the bats that have been in the lineup, which is crazy to say because of how much he strikes out looking. But, I think it'll be good for them to get Donaldson back.
Yeah, it's something that we've obviously have talked about here plenty of the course of the past couple weeks, where it's, we know what he can and can't do, but nonetheless you kind of sit here wondering. All right, the Rays come to town for 4. This is a pretty big series, as we know. For the Yankees, it will be, excuse me, Domingo Germán game to go tonight. Garrett Cole tomorrow on Friday. Saturday will be Nestor Cortez, and Sunday will be Clark Schmidt. Tonight, 7:05 on Yes. They'll see Jeremy Rasmussen. tomorrow night on Friday, also on Yes, and the 7:05 first pitch. They haven't announced who that's going to be yet. Makes me wonder if they'll kind of go. They've been kind of doing the bullpen stuff again, which is really interesting. Tampa kind of went away from it and now went back to it, just with the Springs injury and stuff like that. Saturday, Shane McCallahan goes for the Rays, and we were so close to this having all those great baseball fan pitching matchups within a day of each other between Cole and Shane, but have to wait. 105 on Yes, and then Sunday, 135 on Yes, Zach Eflin goes for Tampa. So I do kind of actually lean with you, Kyle. I do kind of see a sweep here, or not a sweep, a split, rather.
I've changed my mind, though, but go ahead.
Okay. So I do see, for me, it's a split. It's interesting. I don't know if we'll see anything carry over from last weekend, especially since rarely I would say do the Rays and Yankees stuff tend to come northward.
Hopefully we do. Makes it more interesting.
Sure. And to me, the Rays pitching's always kind of made me question when they get out of Tropicana exactly how good they can be every now and then. So I'm riding with I will ride with the split here, I think. It's going to be interesting. I could see the Yankees winning the first two, but then dropping the last two. Nestor's starting to have me concerned a little bit, admittedly. And the Yankees just can't seem to support Clark Schmidt, so
Got his first win finally.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at here. So
awful.
I kind of think that's the case here, and that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go split.
So let me rephrase this. I think a split would be great. I'd call it a good week, but in reality, I think they win one game in this series. Again, don't know when it's going to come, but the Rays they own the Yankees the last few years, and it seems like Yankee Stadium especially. So give me Rays 3-4.
Okay. By the way, I do have some potentially roster breaking news here regarding the Yankees, as it appears that Sean Boyle is actually starting for Scranton now tonight. So take it for what it's worth. Yeah. All right, that being said, let's head over to the Mets, where they have split their first two games with Cincinnati. Look, you chuckle. We talked about it.
Because nothing's really different than Tuesday or Monday.
Right, but the scrappy Reds have been scrappy so far. To that end, though, it's been really interesting because my dad's a Reds fan, so I see a lot of this series over the course of the past couple of days. And the Mets, to me, have really had really great productive at-bats, in all honesty. They've worked counts really well. They've had a lot of good contacted balls. And I know what you're kind of maybe thinking a little bit as well. You know, you'll get the score yesterday. I'm like, that's what I'm getting at, right? Is that there's a lot of offense on Tuesday, and we'll circle back to a big catalyst of that here in just a couple minutes. But, you know, yesterday, for example, 2-1, a lot of hard-hit balls, just kind of like one of those things where, for example, like Hunter Green would just finally get the slider to snap, and it's a double play, like right at the second base, like right at Jonathan India or something like that. But to me, look, they ran Hunter Green out in the fifth inning with over 100-something pitches.
Yeah, and he screwed my bet. I wasn't too happy.
But, you know, like I said, I think, and I know we're on two different ends of this the way it seems, but to me, a lot of positives to be had from the first two games against the Reds because, look, like I said, they're a scrappy bunch. And to me, having these types of at-bats are crucial at this point because you're trying to figure out this lineup. You're trying to figure out what ticks, what doesn't tick. And like I said, to me, yesterday was a big day in terms of, sure, the output doesn't match, and that needs to be addressed somehow, some way. But the at-bats are getting there. Like, you can't argue with the fact that you ran a guy out in the fifth inning with over 100 pitches.
Yeah, Yesterday, I was just kind of shocked that they didn't add any runs against the Reds bullpen. That was kind of surprising to me. You know, they fell behind 1-0. They got the 2 runs in the next 3 innings. And then they didn't score again. They just were barely holding on to the lead. And they are very lucky Justin Verlander was on the mound.
Mm-hmm.
I think if that's David Peterson again, they don't win that game. But I get it. A win's a win. You know, we're not playing what-if games here. But, I mean, they've split since we talked Monday against a Reds team that's not great. If they lose a series today, I think the same mood is there with the Mets. If they win, I'll give them more credit.
Well, that game's coming up shortly in terms of when we're, talking with this and stuff like that. But, yeah, you mentioned, right, I mean, and we'll touch on this briefly here because I think this is really proper to maybe do it now. You mentioned, obviously, Peterson having to start Tuesday. Scherzer got scratched. I wouldn't say late, but it was a late announcement scratch. Dealing with neck spasms. I'm leaning on the don't panic side outright over this because this is something he's dealt with in the past. Kind of has happened to him. I could understand maybe where, we talked actually off air about this a little bit with different people too about how he's dealing, I guess, with shoulder blade, a scapula issue, and again, that's actually a problem he's dealt with in the past too. Both issues go back to 2019 when he was a national. So I'm not doing a ton of like the whole stock thing. A lot of it to me is a lot like the Carrasco thing where he's had this before. This is an issue that's been dealt with before. Obviously, the treatment plans are going to be well known. So, look, it's one of those things where you're going to have to be cautious with it. But to me, it's like, he might miss a start or two, but I'm not going to sit here and press the panic button on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'll kind of say what I feel like we've said a lot. Like, yeah, say he did go on the IL, that sucks, but in reality, this team is struggling because of offense.
Right, 100%, yeah.
Pitching, like, yeah, he had David Peterson, he had whatever, bad start.
Not having his best year.
But, I mean, those kind of games will happen throughout the year, and then your offense still scored 6. I mean, it could have been a winnable game. I just think the offense is more of a concern than the pitching, even if they lost, Verlander or Scherzer to the IL again. That's just me. I think the offense has to pick it up. There's no way it continues to be like this. So they did have 10 hits yesterday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm shocked that they didn't get a couple other runs across against that Reds bullpen. But just take care of business today, and we won't have to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I was alluding to a little bit, right? It's just like 10 hits is nothing to snuff at in that sense either. So, all right. Speaking of offense, though, we'll do Francisco first before Buck because the Buck thing is an interesting discussion point that might ramble here more than it needs to. But I mentioned Monday, right? Francisco Alvarez finally getting a few more at bats and finally starting to turn it up a little bit. And Tuesday, a 2-home-run game. And it's interesting because we talked about with the Yankees, and I think this is we talked about Monday a little bit with the Mets. I think it's really coming to possibly a head here. Francisco Alvarez batting 9th, I don't think can happen. Especially if he's finally figuring this out and the power is finally there. And again, I mentioned this yesterday. He was one of the guys who, like with Hunter Green, would go down 0-2, for example. All of a sudden, you look up and it's like, oh, Hunter Green's at 10 pitches this at bat. And Alvarez, man, he does not leave a lot of balls soft. You know what I mean? They're all hard hit. They're all whatever. Do I think he should be batting 3rd? No. 4th? No. But that 6 hole is pretty interesting given, you look at, like, yesterday, again, talk about Starling Marte and his struggles. He completely whiffed on, like, another bunt attempt yesterday, for example.
He's bunting.
I mean,
That's
bad. So I'm really intrigued here, but it's really good to see Alvarez has come around, especially with catching right now, which we'll touch on in a second, being a premium for the Mets all of a sudden. But what a couple days that he's had, and if he continues to be in this spot of having good at bats and just the power finds itself, I think Buck's gonna have no choice but to move him up and make him just more of a foothold in this lineup.
Yeah, and I have a tweet right here. Yesterday before the game, Buck said Alvarez would get the day off today. Well, now he's in the lineup,
Well,
batting ninth and catching.
right.
So you know what that tells me? He realized that Alvarez is heating up and they're struggling to score runs. So despite it being a day game after a night game, he's back in the lineup.
Yeah.
And he's a young guy, young player. There's no reason why these guys can't play day games after night games. I could see if you're 40 years old. But that's not the case. So I do like that move. Let's see if he, has another impact in the game. But like you said, yeah, seeing him ninth on this in this lineup probably shouldn't be that way.
Right. Now, we'll table the Buck thing again here for a minute because you brought up a good point where he's back in the lineup. And I think it is partially him getting out, but I think partially, too, is the fact that Tomas Nido placed on the IL. He's having some vision issues, believe something regarding dry eye issues. But so Michael Perez gets called up from AAA Syracuse, but to that end, Perez's slash eye at Syracuse isn't great. He's at 194 average-wise at Syracuse. Really great defensive catcher, but I think it's more of a issue of even if, say, Francisco was struggling, I think I know who I'd rather have my choice in the lineup would be today anyway type scenario. And it's tough because the Mets feel like Nito is probably going to be back and ready to go in all honesty in a couple days. It's just that you can't play with just one active catcher on your roster. And that would have been Alvarez. So they were kind of put in a box, and I don't want to make it sound like it's the wrong thing because it is the right thing to do. It's just that it's a tough spot to be in for the Mets, especially since you don't know. Catching's a tough position. It's the toughest position arguably in sports to kind of have, and those guys get dinged up more than any other player in baseball. And so you just never know what might happen. So that's why I think it's part of the reason why we see Alvarez again in the lineup today is the fact that, Nito's on the IL. The backup at the moment of Michael Perez is just not a good offensive catcher. And, the other catchers that you possibly have available to you, and Nick Mayer at Syracuse, who does not have any major league experience. The other one is Gary Sanchez, who you just brought onto a minor league deal, is quite the box to be put in, but I think right move maybe having Alvarez in there with Nito out.
How long do you think until he gets a call up? You know what's coming.
Gary?
I
think it all depends
I'm saying quick.
on Navarez's health maybe and whatever. Because here's the interesting thing: we talk about this with notably Chad Pinder the other day, opting out of his deal with Washington and getting his release because of being a vested veteran. Gary does have to ride out the next few weeks here with this deal before he has that opt-out available to him should he want to exercise it. I think it all depends. Now, not to spoil, I guess, too much here in a few minutes when we get to Rochester and Syracuse, but, first game with the S-Mets yesterday in Buffalo, and Gary had himself an absolute offensive showing. So I think it might be maybe a matter of they're just giving him the at-bats because they're going to have to add him to the 40-man. That results in having to take somebody off the 40-man. So I don't know. Personally, I don't know if they actually bring Gary up. I think he's a good depth piece to have. I think a lot of it just depends, because, look, they say Nito's going to be ready to go here in a few days anyway. At that point, I still would ride Alvarez. I mean, Alvarez, to me, is again, going back, the young guys need these at-bats, and I think he's one of these guys, at the very least anyway, finding that groove right now for the Mets that too good of a bet to keep out of the lineup. So I don't know how Gary exactly maybe fits into that fold, to be honest.
Yeah, you have a good point. I don't know. I just feel like they signed him to a minor league deal, but he's not going to be down there for long. Mm-hmm. I just have this feeling that in 10 days
maybe
he'll be up. I'm not saying you're wrong, and I mean you might end up being right, but just my feeling. I feel like eventually he'll just keep hitting the cover off the ball down in AAA. They'll be like, all right, we need the offense. We'll bring him up. I don't know what they're going to do with the whole roster, but I just feel like we'll see him soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when he was with the Giants here to start the year, he was at Sacramento, their AAA affiliate, and he was not hitting well at all with them. So I don't know what to make of it. It was I wouldn't say it caught me off guard, but it was one of those things we always kind of joked about this past offseason was Gary would sign with the Mets anyway. So who knows? One last time we'll hear. We finally had Buck Showalter toss for the first time in his Mets tenure Tuesday. on an non-interference call ended up being called. That was it. Will Myers the one who slid, right? Yeah, Will Myers. I know Kevin Newman was in there too, but I couldn't tell one way or another, and it's a non-reviewable call because it's a judgment call by the umpire. And Buck did, to me, the right thing to try to fire up your team in that sense, right? You know, the classic adage. But it's interesting because I think we've all been kind of waiting for Buck to have that first run, and he finally gets it. Now, don't expect it to be, I'd say, this multiple thing over, say, like Terry Collins would in that sense, you know what I mean? But because that's not really the type of guy that Buck is. But Buck, you know, he can get going every now and then if you really go against him in a way that he feels like you've wronged the team.
Yeah, I was watching live. I was just hoping he wasn't going to have a heart attack because he is 66 years old. And
he's a lively 66.
He hasn't yelled like that in a while. I mean, as you just said, it's his first ejection with the Mets. But you said, you know, he needed to do that to kind of fire up the team. And the team actually got going. They were down 7-1 and came back, made it a one-run game going to the ninth, and almost, you know, tied the game. So I think that brought them some energy. And then they go ahead and win the next day. So maybe that starts something good for this team. I don't know, but I think we need to see it more. I think Buck needs to go out there and do it more. I just love how he was, you know, calling all the umpires out. He's like, "There's 4 of you out there," and he's like, "How could you miss that?"
Yeah. I don't know. It's pretty interesting. So obviously the Mets, one more in Cincinnati here, and they get going pretty much a half hour with that. Be Kodai Senga getting the start today for the Mets. He's going against Derek Law. Nick Lodullo got scratched last night from the start. So after that, 4 games in Washington. The Mets are TBD across the board as we currently stand because Scherzer's a question mark. I'd imagine they're probably debating about whether or not Peterson gets another go, if he'll just bring up Budo or somebody like that. So who knows? But for Washington, here's who you can expect. Tomorrow night, 7:05 on your local Picks affiliate will be Mackenzie Gore. Saturday at 4:05 on SNY will be Trevor Williams. Sunday, 1:35 on SNY, Jake Irvin, who really impressed on his debut this year after getting called up from Rochester in his one start. And then Monday, 4:05, it will be Patrick Corbin, who has somehow brought his ERA down to sub-5 at 4.87. I think the Mets go 3 of 1 against Washington. Just the adage of it's hard to take 4 games. It's tough to do. That being said, part of me really does feel the Mets could get a 4-game sweep of Washington. They're coming back from the West Coast. Played tough against the Giants, but you know in the end they kind of just were national themselves and ended up getting shellacked. So yeah, I'm going Mets here 3 of 4.
I say the Mets lose the series today, and then they split with they split with the Nationals. It's kind of, I think, yeah, Trevor Williams pitched against them earlier in the year when they lost that series. He pitched really well. I think that's going to be a game where they have trouble. And Mackenzie Gore is a lot better than people think. And, yeah, I just see a split. I think the Patrick Corbin game is going to be like 20-1, though. Mets win that game because he is so bad. I don't know how he still has a job, even on a terrible team. But yeah, the Mets they're having a slow stretch right now. I mean, they'll pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, sports. I mean, the thing with today too, is Derek Law is a reliever, so I don't know how this is really going to play out for the Reds, especially with their bullpen. Ian Gabo's like their top guy before Alexi Diaz, and those are guys who usually are pitching your 8 and 9 innings. So I don't know how this is really going to go for the Reds today.
I'm laughing because I don't know if you just caught on to what I said, but I said the Mets will pick it up. I haven't even said that with the Yankees. I'm more positive with the Mets.
But that's something we alluded to, though, on really the last week, is just like the vibes are just different in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and it's so weird. They're a game under 500, I'm saying this, where the Yankees are 4 over.
Right. Positionally, right? It's all about position. Before we get out of here, let's talk a couple minutes about Rochester and Syracuse. Both have split their opening games so far. Stop us if you've heard that one before with them at this point. Syracuse is in Buffalo. that offense is just continuing on such a mark. I would be really intrigued to do some splits, and who knows, maybe this weekend if I'm bored, I might just dive deep into the baseball references and figure it out. But yeah, like I mentioned, and I teased it up a little bit here, but Gary's just first game, absolute game for him. Vientos doing this thing, Mauricio's still doing his thing. That lineup is so good, it kind of makes you wonder, again, we go back to something I brought up last year about the S-Mets, what is the pitching doing? But the S-Mets offense, just, I mean, absolute terror here, again, to get up the bat going against Buffalo.
Yeah, I forgot. I know Billy Epler spoke to the media, I think, early last week, and he was asked about why Mark Vientos has not been called up, and he gave some reason. I don't know. Did you see that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, to me, I can't believe it. I see a stat here this morning. He leads the International League in OPS. He has 11 home runs. He has a good average. What more does he have to do to earn a call-up? For real, though.
Yeah.
At what point is he just going to sit there and be like, I'm never going to get called up? I mean, I don't think you can do much more to earn a call-up at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got to go back and find what Billy Epler said there. There was some reason he gave. He's probably going to say something about, like, experience, but I don't know. I just think he deserves a call-up right now.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I don't know if it's service time manipulation at this point or what, because we're right on the doorstep of you're probably going to see some guys get called up who, they kind of do that too and stuff like that. And I don't know. It's interesting. For Rochester, they're home this week, as we mentioned, on Monday. Split the opening 2 games. Corey Abbott was simply on one the other day, and did real well. It's a bit of a bittersweet moment, though, for the Red Wings here. They debut their new video board as well, but they also announced the passing of Milo the Bad Dog. So it's been a bittersweet couple of days for the Red Wings here to get going for the week.
Yeah, and they won, was it the day after the passing of the dog?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was cool. They probably showed stuff on the new board, Mile on the board. Mm-hmm. So that was a cool win for them. Obviously, I think it's, 3 years the dog's been around? So I'm sure a lot of people have seen him around the park, and it's sad, it's unfortunate, but, I'm sure they'll probably end up getting another bat dog eventually down the road, and I think those are always cool, seeing, the dogs go out there and pick the bats up. It's cool to watch.
Yeah, it should be. It'll be pretty interesting because I know I'm going to the game tomorrow, Friday, officially, and for the first time, I'm sitting out in the left field seats. So, of course, I won't be able to see the video board clearly.
Are those left field seats like much more than a regular, or
No,
is
they're
it all the same? Like,
No, they're about $5 more, the terrace seats out there. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I can't wait to see it in action. I mean, it's a full-fledged thing, right? I mean, they modernized it, and it's part of that whole thing of revamping minor league baseball. So
Yeah.
if there is a positive in all this, it's part of that too.
yeah, I thought that was long overdue. Like, I remember sitting behind the plate one time, and that video board that they used to have was just so small, and you could just tell that it was outdated. The graphics weren't as clean, and so that was a good addition to the park. I'm sure a lot of people like it more. You can see better. So yeah, it's a great thing that they did.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so that will wrap up Concrete Jungle for today. We'll talk with everybody again on Monday. No, I'm going to a game tomorrow, Kyle. You just you're sticking with having everything up on the TVs, and a lot of playoff stuff going on.
And
Still, a lot of exciting games.
Losing more money, boy.
Jeez,
God, it's tough.
why you got to do that?
Last 2 days I've lost quite a bit of money, but it's not money. It's money that I've won the last week, so it's tough, but I'll bounce back.
Yeah, I have faith in you. I have faith in you. All right, so we will talk with everybody then on Monday officially. Until then, enjoy the games. Everybody get outside if you can. Here locally, go support some baseball, and we will talk with everybody then.